Hey, hello to everyone. It is April Fool's Day, April 1st, 2022 at approximately 10:15 a.m. And I wish that what I was about to say to you was an April Fool's joke, but it's a significant nightmare. And I want to thank everyone who is now coming out of the woodwork supporting our efforts. People are finally starting to tap into the truth bombs that I'm delivering. If you're just tuning in, my name is Patrick Lovell. I'm a muckraker, which means I'm an investigative journalist. I'm also a producer. I've produced the probably most important revelations of the last 70 years, maybe ever, all things considered. And I know that sounds slightly arrogant. It's not meant to be. It's because I know what I'm talking about. The first thing I have to tell you is that you have to watch The Con. It's at www.thecon.tv. If you go to our website, there are 4 options that you can rent and download. Our television series is available on Apple TV, on Amazon Prime, on Vimeo and Microsoft, and it's also available for free. If you go to your local library, get a library card, download an app called Hoopla, and you can watch it for free. So those are the options. The reason why you want to watch The Con and join us on a crusade is because we have to collectively come together, the tens of millions of us who have been victims of corruption, and we have to come together as American citizens in the light of liberty and justice for all based on the integrity of law. And we have to move as quickly as possible because it could be coming, the era of all of this madness could be coming to another end. And that end, based on you not understanding what's going on, may very well be the end of you. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't, you've never known me. If you didn't know me, you might kind of think, okay, who is this jackass? This guy telling me the whole world is on the verge of collapsing, or maybe I'm going to be destroyed in some way when I don't even know who this guy is. Okay, I run the risk of that. I throw the dice because this is a very loud, convoluted, completely distracted universe of too much information all the time with disinformation and distraction that basically has you wanting to go to the next page. But let me tell you something. If you keep clicking to the next page, one day these problems are going to arrive at your door, and like millions of others, at one point you're going to start screaming, somebody help me, and there's not going to be anybody there to help you unless we help each other. This isn't a blue or a red sort of paradigm because all of the political apparatus of the United States has been completely corrupted. I'm going to give you another example of what's been happening in the 24-hour cycle that brings this full circle, okay? So before I get that, please, everybody, go to YouTube. Please like and subscribe our page, which is called Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con. We need to get those numbers up. We need to try to replace, really, quite frankly, all of the prognosticators, the pundits, everybody online media that talk around in circles. They circle jerk each other. Everybody tries to come at it from this sort of like, hey, what's the 24-hour cycle? What's shocking today? Will Smith slapping Chris Rock was pretty shocking, but in comparison to tens of millions of people who have been sabotaged, set up, run over, railroaded, destroyed by an illegal, corrupt system that you don't understand is really the news you need to be paying attention to, and nobody can put it together like I can because they won't, because they're afraid to, because they get paid not to, or because, quite frankly, they're stupid, which is a big part of it. Does that make me the smartest guy in the universe? No. I just got instincts and I've got balls. That's the difference. And I've also got a real commitment to liberty and justice for all. And you might want to think of me as Popeye delivering a Mike Tyson uppercut to the frickin' corruption in the form of Bluto. Get it? That's who I am. So you either believe me or you don't. And if you don't, go your separate ways because there's a lot of fucking villains and charlatans and bullshit artists to truth from. I'm here to truth bomb the con because we're all about hashtag truth is marching, hashtag Exodus, hashtag the resurrection of liberty and justice for all through the integrity of law, hashtag Patrick Lovell truth bombs the con, hashtag the con, and I'm probably sure I'm missing one or two that I'd like to lay down there. But man, you got enough information to run with. So what is happening today that is different than yesterday? More and more revelations. So the Federal Reserve, I mentioned to you guys a couple of weeks ago, really now about a month ago, I asked you how many people think the system is corrupt. And everybody was like, yeah, hundreds of millions of us know it is. We all know it's rigged. Then I asked you, how is it corrupt? And nobody could figure that out. Then I asked you if you know who Jerome Powell was. Many, many, many of you do not know who Jerome Powell is. Jerome Powell is the chair of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is at the apex of the money flow to the entire global economy, unless, of course, because of Russia invading Putin and China trying to reconfigure with Saudi Arabia to potentially change the American dollar as the world's global currency, whether or not all of this stuff can maintain itself, which we're all built on a house of cards to maintain really the wealth distribution to the top. That is basically stolen it from everybody who's too stupid to know they're pissing on your head telling you it's rain. And I'm sorry if I offended you, if I called you stupid, but if you keep following a bunch of liars and grifters and con artists, that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to get played. And so I'm coming at you with the freaking banner of the red, white, and blue, which is liberty and justice for all. Get it? Because we have a system of the law that if you parse it and you do investigations and you get the evidence and you get the facts and you present that in a court of law, there are laws that are created to basically hold, criminality to account. That's what we've done for our entire existence. And the law continues to evolve, but at the same time, what you're not aware of is because the system of collusion of power, which is complicity of corruption, we created through the white-collar law firms, which have become machines to basically create LLCs and, all sorts of limited liability scenarios to where they can hide the apparatus of how this corruption works because it's a revolving door and everybody's in on it. Is that enough to blow your mind? Well, you still don't know what I'm talking about because you haven't seen the goddamn con. And if you watch the con, you'd see it spelled out to you, A plus B equals C, and then you'd be like, what the fuck? Just like everybody else who's coming to the fore right now is coming out of the woodwork, and I've got farmers in the Midwest going, oh my God, Patrick, the stuff that you're telling us about the con, once we tap into it, it's like, are you kidding me? That's what we're going through right now. Yeah, we don't know what year it is collectively because nobody understands how the system works. And I'll just give you like a pop culture reference. It took me 5 seasons to get into Game of Thrones. But then when I finally watched Game of Thrones, I watched it like 5 to 10 times because I couldn't get enough of it, and it got better with each time I watched it, right? Well, that's happening to many people out there because they're like, holy mother of God. I watched the con, then I had to rewatch it, then I had to rewatch it again to understand all of the details of which you guys laid on me, which is the freaking truth that the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Securities and Exchange Commission, agencies around the country, the United States government, the presidency, Congress, and the Supreme Court all failed to deliver to us. And then, of course, then we get to blame media, which is fake media. The New York Times, all of the major papers of this country didn't deliver the big picture because in the end, most of these big newspapers of merit, that we depend on to give us truth through the Fourth Estate, which based on the way we configured the construction of the United States is considered the Fourth Estate because that's how we do hold power to account. The entirety of the United States is supposed to be premised on separation of powers so that the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branch are all separate so that they can operate in a way that neither is tethered to the same vertical power, which would be called monarchies or autocracies or dictatorships, or in the case of communism, in the way it rolled out in the USSR, would have been Stalin, which would have been top down, which is the Politburo, okay, which led to oligarchs, by the way, and which isn't all that different than Putin, who is basically the king of Russia now. So all sorts of crazy things with history and everything else. But to get to the point of corruption now and what intersects with what we've got and what we've been showing you all along is, for example, I started off with Jerome Powell was involved with insider trading in which he's got a conflict of interest with the world's largest asset manager who got put into play by former director of the New York Fed, Timothy Geithner, who basically made a proclamation that the American people were foam on the runway for the freaking crashing banks. And the way they did that was they put an asset manager by the name of Larry Fink and BlackRock to administer the emergency stimulus of the Federal Reserve, which pumped trillions of dollars into the banking apparatus that destroyed the United States and the American dream and pretty much the globe through what we expose in the con, which is the full engineered criminal apparatus at every single level that basically nuked the global economy based on illegal reps and warranties and deceptive acts and practices that are all illegal, that if the government actually did its job and could nail who needed to be nailed, we would have seen people go to jail. Most notably, the CEOs which were guilty of what we call control fraud. It was all racketeering. We proved in the con that we found the only RICO conviction in the entire country. What is RICO? RICO was designed in the 70s by none other than, for example, Rudolph Giuliani at the time, when he was, the DA, or I guess he was the DA of Manhattan, when they were taking down the crime bosses of the mob. It's called racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. And it takes down the entirety of a huge complicit criminal organization, which has become our financial system. But the mob could never in a million years understand or even dream or even think of, and this goes for, Pablo Escobar, the great the huge drug kingpin in Colombia in the 80s, or, Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind 9/11. None of these guys could have even envisioned the amount of destruction that our own financial system could create through this mechanism, which is just basically smoke and mirrors to destroy the golden goose and take fees in the process. But what none of us ever knew was that the Federal Reserve would be on the hook to be able to bail out their criminal activity, instead of do what the mandated purpose of the Federal Reserve is, which is to create full employment and low inflation. What they've done is simply created flow of money to the top by basically destroying the golden goose, which is manufacturing and, the dynamism of America and a distributive model and all of these things that happen in microeconomics that would lead to a dynamic, vibrant society, which is what we had more so than anybody else in the world for quite a while after World War II. But now we don't, because we have a smash and grab society. And by the way, smash and grab has been done for literally centuries. It's a technique that's involved to set people up on loans to where they can't afford to pay those loans, and then they give them over a barrel, and then they bankrupt them, and they take all their assets, and that's how corruption happens, and it's happened throughout, the 17th century to basically now. Okay, so the long and the short of it is, though, what's happened in this latest incarnation is on display in the con, www.thecon.tv. But the other side of the equation is the corruption of the judiciary, which is exemplified in the last 48 hours by Clarence Thomas, who sits on the Supreme Court of the United States. His wife, Ginny Thomas, is connected to the Koch brothers, who are funneling all sorts of money to her, which of course she's married to Clarence Thomas, and his decisions have been basically parallel to what the Koch brothers have said publicly for the last decade and a half, maybe 2 decades. And ultimately, she was involved with she told the Trump administration, don't give in, that you can fight this illegal, with the big lie, which was, of course, Biden stealing the election, which is nonsense from this standpoint. I mean, even though everything else is insane, and I can think of a lot, quite frankly. But look, Trump came out of this whole era of corruption. His entire business model has been on this forever. And I know that a lot of people are probably with me in the whole thing because they're thinking about the deep state, because of the corruption that happens with the Ivy League meritocracy and the Democratic Party, which is the deep state. Yeah, that's true, by the way. But that doesn't mean that the Reds, especially under Trump, who's been in real estate, laundering money for all sorts of bad actors throughout the world, through his real estate all over, Manhattan and elsewhere. But ultimately, it's his business model, which is control fraud, which he inflates assets, which is on display with stuff that was going on in the district attorney's office of Manhattan, who an African American dropped it for whatever reason, because he didn't want to get into the I guess probably the political firestorm that was going to follow, which is insane, because that means he didn't do the investigation, even though the previous DA was this guy Cyrus Vance, who had Trump organization dead to rights, based on everything that I'm telling you and we show in the con. And beyond that, all of the people that the Trump apparatus he put into power when he said he was going to drain the swamp were the people I'm talking about. He put in all the major financiers of Wall Street to basically control his government, and I'm pretty sure that Trump got away with all sorts of stuff during the CARES Act as well. That's a whole other composite of this. What I'm talking about, it's a free-for-all. How does it affect you? Let me tell you something. There are people right now who are innocent that have never been behind on their mortgages, particularly women of color, that are actually getting railroaded and having their houses stolen because of all of the insanity that happens at the bottom, because we've got so much corruption in the courts because of Fed policy that basically comes down the pike to people that can figure out ways to get into what I'm trying to tell you has become our economy, which is Fed policy. Fed policy provides trillions of dollars of low interest, and then we have a thing called bond buybacks through quantitative easing. So it's the supply and demand is coming from the Federal Reserve through this corrupt apparatus. So the two things I want to close with is that You have revelations of corruption at the Federal Reserve, revelations of corruption at the Supreme Court. Obviously, there's corruption throughout Congress. There's corruption throughout the Department of Justice. Nobody wants to end this because they're all getting paid by this. But as an American citizen, you do not live in a country where the law is equal. You do not live in a country where there is literally equal opportunity and the opportunity for dynamism, where you can actually try to create any sort of life that you want to. And the fallout is, if you fail, you have bankruptcy. Okay, why isn't there bankruptcy for the large financial institutions that ultimately destroy everybody? Because they've got the Federal Reserve giving them nonstop money to continue the facade of what we think our economy is. And on top of that, we don't have investigations and we don't have the law for those above the law, which means it's an aristocracy or a monarchy, but I like to call it a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate. I'm sure that's enough information from now. Many of you have said this guy is a good guy. It has nothing to do with red or blue. It's all about true. And what I will tell you in closing, and I will tell you from this point forward, when you have the truth, you are bulletproof, and that's in the con. Onwards and upwards, amigos.